After I caught my ex-husband, Alan, red-handed with his mistress when I was pregnant, I decided to surprise Alan by returning home early. I had planned to make him a nice breakfast before he left for work, hoping to do something special for him. My husband cheated on me while I was pregnant, then took our newborn baby without permission to meet his girlfriend, so I called the police, and now they're both in legal trouble. Alan had been telling me how much he missed me, so when I got home, I discovered him in bed with another woman. Of course, I screamed and yelled, probably waking up half the neighborhood. I couldn't believe what I was seeing, and he kept apologizing to me in an attempt to explain himself. However, rather than accept responsibility for his actions, he actually tried to turn the situation around by telling me that I shouldn't have come home so early and that I should have called him before arriving. It seemed as though he was essentially blaming me for catching him in the act. I was furious and devastated, and I demanded to know who the woman was, but Alan kept avoiding the question. He said it didn't matter and tried to deflect by saying that we could talk about it later, but there was no later at that time. The woman's expression showed that this wasn't the first time she had visited my house, and her demeanor was cold and unfazed, as if she didn't give a damn about what was going on. When I asked her if she and my husband were having an affair, she nodded coldly and shamelessly, admitting what she had done. Alan, on the other hand, yelled at me to ignore her, saying he would explain everything to me later. The woman then scoffed at him and started putting her clothes back on, which is when I noticed something that made my stomach drop. She was wearing my red nightgown. I was shocked to see that a woman would wear someone else's clothing while having a sexual relationship with their husband. She casually said she had nothing to wear for the night, so she had gone through my closet and picked out what she wanted. Then, with a nasty smirk, she added, "It's not like you can fit into these anymore," pointing at my pregnant belly. I was furious and incredulous when she took off my nightgown. I asked her why in the world she thought she was wearing my clothes after having sex with my husband. I lost all control and lunged at her, grabbing her hair and yanking it as hard as I could. She screamed in agony and thrashed around, but I was taller and stronger than her, so she couldn't break free. I swear, if I hadn't been pregnant, I would have stripped her to the ground and given her a good beating, but I didn't want to endanger my unborn child. The woman kept trying to fight back until Alan swiftly stepped in and pulled her away from me. She screamed at Alan, her face still full of defiance, that she was going to kill me for touching her hair and that he must defend her if he ever wanted to see her again. Her voice had a certain authority, and she spoke to Alan as though she were his partner, as though she had every right to control him. At this point, I began to realize that she wasn't just any woman, they knew each other well, and, surprisingly, he started to turn against me. I asked him to tell me exactly who she was and what was going on between them. At this point, Alan started to explain that he had become less attracted to me over the months since I became pregnant. He explained that as his feelings for me waned, he met Lila, the woman I had caught him with, and that she had been able to turn things around. I was angry that I had slapped her and told me to calm down and act more logically because I couldn't believe it. He went on to say that what had begun as just hookups between him and Lila had now turned into something serious. Alan casually told me he had been planning to talk to me about it, but since I was pregnant, he wanted to wait until after I gave birth. He wanted to spare me the pain, he said, as if that was some kind of favor he had already done. Hearing his words made me feel as though the ground had been torn out from under me all those months. All that love I thought we shared meant completely nothing to him anymore. During the 4 years of our marriage, I had supported Alan through everything, his career, his dreams, and his struggles, and he turned around and stabbed me in the back like this. I felt like all the love I had given and the sacrifices I had made meant nothing to him, and I couldn't believe the betrayal that occurred when I was pregnant and carrying his child inside of me. The father of my child was out having fun with another woman. Alan tried to say that we could discuss it later, but I was done listening. The pain of everything he had done was too great, and my frustration boiled over. I told him bluntly that he needed to pack up his belongings and leave my house, taking his mistress with him. If he was already so certain that he didn't love me anymore, then what was the point of staying married and making excuses that didn't matter to me anymore? Beyond anything I could stand, even if he no longer felt attracted to me. How dare he treat me like this? Alan was shocked that I would take such a strong stance, and he attempted to argue back, but I wasn't going to back down. I told him that I would call the police on him if he didn't leave, and I wouldn't let him stay in my house for a second longer. Eventually, my ex-husband reluctantly agreed and began packing up his belongings, but before they left, Lila had the gall to mock me, saying everything. She went on to say that this was the reason no man could ever stay with me, despite what Alan had told her over the months. Her words were painful and felt like salt being rubbed into a wound I didn't think could be hurt any longer. To make things worse, Alan didn't say anything to defend me, and they both left without saying anything about regret or apology. As soon as the door closed behind them, I broke down under the weight of the betrayal because the hurt and the loss overwhelmed me, and I couldn't contain myself. Despite how broken I felt, I got back up and decided that I couldn't let Alan or anyone else take away my sense of self-worth. Over the next few weeks, I sought legal advice and filed for divorce. And fortunately, I had been wise enough to have Alan sign a prenuptial agreement before we were married, meaning our marriage was protected. I cried like I had never cried before, but in the middle of that pain, I knew I couldn't let them break me because I had been raised by a single mother who had taught me to be strong and to stand up for myself no matter what. Since I was in a much better financial situation than he was, I knew that the divorce process would be much quicker and easier. The only issue we would need to resolve was who would have custody of our child. As the mother, I was given primary custody of our newborn, so I would raise him, and Alan would have supervised visitation until our child was older. After everything that had happened, I couldn't trust him to be alone with the baby, and the lawyer said that it was. In the end, we both agreed that this was in the child's best interest, especially considering the circumstances. 4 days ago, I gave birth to a gorgeous baby boy. The experience was overwhelming, but I was relieved to have my mother by my side the entire time because I needed all the comfort I could get during the entire birthing process. I was still in the hospital recovering when Alan visited me and our child the following day, and he surprisingly seemed genuinely proud to be a father despite all the anger I felt toward him. I wanted us to at least try to be good co-parents. For the sake of our son, who was the only thing that mattered. After a little while, my mom decided to go back home to rest because she had been up with me for what seemed like hours, and I could tell she needed it. I was also tired, both physically and emotionally, and I was desperate for some sleep. Alan promised to stay in the room and keep an eye on our son while I slept, and I told him to wake me if he cried because he would likely need to be fed, and I was disoriented and confused as I tried to gather my thoughts after my mother frantically asked me where I was sleeping 3 hours later. We looked around the hospital room, but neither Alan nor my baby was there. My heart began to race, and I could feel the adrenaline pumping as I realized something was seriously wrong. I immediately asked the nurses if they had seen Alan or my son, and to my horror, one of them finally told me that she had seen Alan walking. Leaving the hospital with my baby, I was stunned by the realization that Alan had no right to take my child away without my consent, especially after he had assured me he would stay and watch over him. My mind was spinning, and I was having a hard time processing what was happening, so I grabbed my phone and called him frantically, but he didn't answer, which only made my anxiety worse. My heart was racing, and I was on the edge of a panic attack. Where did Alan take him, and what if my son woke up? After several missed calls, I thought Alan had finally picked up, but to my surprise, it wasn't Alan's voice on the other end. It was Layla's, who calmly told me that my baby was with her and that Alan had brought him back to their place to show off our newborn to me. I was hungry, wondering what he would eat, and my mind was filled with a lot of unsettling questions, each one more terrifying than the last. Alan had asked me if he could bring Lila with him because I had not permitted her to visit me at the hospital. I had declined because I didn't want to see her. I asked her how my son was and to give Alan the phone so I could tell him that I didn't want to leave with my child without permission. Lila then informed me that my son had woken up shortly after Alan had brought him there and was crying, obviously hungry, so Alan had rushed to a grocery store to buy some formula so they could feed him. Phone behind by mistake, so I had to wait if I wanted to talk to him. I was shocked because my son had woken up crying and hungry, and she wanted me to wait. What right did they have to give my son formula when I, as his mother, hadn't consented to that? I immediately demanded that she drive back to the hospital and bring my son back to me so I could feed him, but Lila asserted that she and Alan knew what they were doing, saying that they would be my son's parents going forward and that they knew what was best for him. Additionally, she told me to stop worrying and that after they fed him, Alan would bring the baby back to me. Her tone was so cold and contemptuous that it sounded like she was a deranged psycho trying to defend keeping my hungry infant child away from me. I persisted in urging her to bring my son back, but she kept saying that she and Alan had read parenting books and were ready to handle my child without me. Her words only made me angrier at that point, and I immediately ended the call with Lila. I called the police right away and told them that my ex-husband had taken my newborn son and left him with a stranger. My heart was pounding as I described how worried I was for my baby's safety, especially since I had just given birth a day earlier. I was afraid that something might happen to him and that he might be scared or hurt without me, so I needed to make sure he was returned to me safely. The police arrived promptly, and an hour later, Alan and Lila were arrested for kidnapping and endangering my child shortly after they brought my son. I hurried to change him and feed him when he returned to the hospital. Although he appeared to be okay physically, I could tell he had been crying for hours because his little face was red. The whole thing was a nightmare, but I was relieved that my baby was back where he belonged with me. Since then, my ex and Lila have been released on bail, but they are still being charged and will soon have to appear in court. I made it clear that I wasn't dropping the charges and that I wanted to see them punished for what they did, so this wasn't something I could simply disregard the fact that my baby's safety was in jeopardy and that they had to answer for their actions. At first, Alan was adamant that he hadn't done anything wrong, that I was exaggerating, and that I shouldn't have called the police on them. He attempted to defend himself by saying that he was just trying to show off our son, but it was clear that he didn't understand how serious the situation was. I suppose that after speaking with a lawyer, Alan's perspective has changed, and he is now asking me to Reddit. Ida updated everyone on the charges, saying that he is facing jail time and pleading with me to forgive him. I am just as shocked as everyone else, wondering why Alan and Lila would do something like this. When we got divorced, I thought we could at least be supportive co-parents for the sake of our son, but what Alan has done goes far beyond crossing any line. It is unforgivable. He had no right to simply take my baby and leave, especially since he didn't even have primary custody. I've seen some comments asking why I called the police, and to be honest, it makes me think that some of you don't fully understand what it means to be a parent, especially a mother or any parent who has a child. He doesn't get to make decisions like this without consulting me, especially when it involves our one-day-old newborn son. He also shows a complete lack of respect for me as his mother by not telling me or taking into account how it would affect me or the baby. My son was crying, his diaper was not changed, and he was hungry when he came back to me. It broke my heart to see him in that state. No one, especially not Alan and Lila, has the right to put my baby in that situation. As a mother, I had to take the necessary steps to ensure my child's safety and protection. Newborns, in particular, require constant care. They need to be fed, changed, and held. The only way to guarantee that he was given back to me right away. How could my ex and LLA just decide to buy and feed my baby formula without consulting me? That decision wasn't theirs, especially since it was made by the mother. It's quite ridiculous. More importantly, how could my ex leave my baby with someone I don't even know well? I only know her because I caught her sleeping with him. What if something happened to my baby while he was with her? What if she had done something to hurt him? I'm grateful that my baby is back with me and that he's okay, but I'm going to make sure Alan and Lila are held accountable for what they did. My top priority is my son, and I will do everything in my power to protect him forever, even if it means making difficult decisions. Update 2. It's been a week since my last update, and I'm relieved to say that my baby and I are safe. Dangerous and careless, the thought alone terrifies me. I don't regret calling the police, not even for a moment. Doing well now that we're back home, and my mom is staying with us to help. I've also made sure to install cameras everywhere in case I'm not taking any chances with my son's safety as a result of everything that's happened. As for my ex, he has been pleading with me for mercy to have the charges dropped because he seems afraid of going to jail, but I've been ignoring him. The other day, he tried to come over to my place and talk to me firmly, but I refused him because he showed up without warning, looking very agitated and desperate. Come in instead. I went out onto the porch and shut the door behind me. My son was asleep, and I wasn't going to let this man wake him up. Alan essentially told me that, as my child's father, he had every right to take him wherever he wanted and that he wanted me to stop being the sneering ex-wife and just let everything go. He wanted me to drop the charges right away and try to explain to the police that it was all a big misunderstanding. His audacity was truly astounding. I told him that I wasn't. He looked me in the eye and said, in a condescending tone, "This whole situation and how you have acted is exactly why I couldn't be with you anymore. You're so controlling and rigid, this is why I cheated, and it's no wonder things fell apart between us." He stated, going to do anything like that when it wasn't true, with total disregard for everything I had gone through and everything we had gone through. Everything you touch. I was shocked by his choice of words, but before I could respond, he kept screaming at me, "Do you think you are the only parent here? This is my son, too, and I deserve your respect." He had no right to call the police and have me arrested because it seemed like I was the one who pushed him to cheat, caused him to fall out of love, and made him feel trapped. He appeared to be completely unaware of the seriousness of what he had done and seemed to believe that I was to blame. You don't get to stand there and tell me why you fell out of love with me. You cheated, you lied, and you're the one who destroyed everything. I'm glad we got a divorce, and I don't care about you anymore, but this isn't about us, it's about my son you took. I took a deep breath, stood erect, and told him that since he was the father, he could do whatever he wanted without any repercussions. You and I both know that you had no right to visit your girlfriend while I was still in the hospital recovering from his birth, and now you believe that I should just let him go. I don't care if you're afraid of going to jail because I won't. Drop the charges. His jaw clenched, and I could tell he was trying to think of something to say, but I cut him off. You no longer get to play the victim, Alan. You made your own decisions and are now dealing with the consequences because you share my son's DNA. Let me remind you that fatherhood is about deeds, not biology, and your actions have only served to highlight how unfit and immature you are to make decisions for him. I will ensure that the court punishes you for this. I then closed the door on his face as he continued to yell, but he crossed a line, and I'm not giving up. As for Lila, she has been sending me the most disgusting and insane messages ever since, as if it were her personal goal to harass me at every opportunity. The woman's audacity is unbounded. She has written to me stating that she was excited to become my son's new mother, but that I ruined her chance out of jealousy because I got her arrested. She then told me that she wished for me and my son to die in a car accident and that we didn't deserve to live. I was shocked to read that message because it was so disgusting. She is the kind of person who wishes death on someone, especially a mother and her child, completely disgusting and rude. I've shown my lawyer all of Lila's offensive messages, and we're acting right away. We intend to obtain a restraining order against her as soon as possible because of how dangerous and malicious her messages have been, and we believe it's essential to make sure she stays away from me and my child forever. Update 3. It's been a month and a half since my last update, and yesterday was the day of the court hearing. Naturally, Alan and Lila had their attorneys present, attempting to minimize what had Alan's defense was full of excuses, and he attempted to say that he was just trying to be a good father by taking the baby to Lila while I was asleep and that he would return the baby to me later that day. He said that I was largely to blame for not letting him bring LLA to visit our son, even though he didn't intend to cause any harm. He also claimed that I freaked out because of my hormones and foolishly called the police, but regardless of what he said, the truth he took my baby without my consent, left him in the care of a woman I hardly knew, and essentially disregarded my rights as a mother. There was no justification for what he had done, and he begged the judge for some leniency. As expected, she also refused to accept responsibility, acting as though she had every right to be involved with my son as if she were now a stepmother. She claimed that I had harbored resentment toward her ever since she had won my husband from me and that I was attempting to make her life difficult. The judge needed to understand the true nature of my ex's girlfriend and why she needed to keep a safe distance from me and the baby. I could see the shock on everyone's faces as my lawyer stood in the courtroom and started reading out all of Lila's disgusting messages aloud, filled with cruelty and threats. After everything was presented, including the timeline of events, police reports, and my testimony, I could see that Lila had no respect for me, my son, or our boundaries. Alan was found guilty of kidnapping and endangering the welfare of a child, and Lila was also charged with contributing to the child's endangerment. In the end, Alan received a sentence that included a year of probation and required parenting classes. If he violates the terms of his probation, he will go to jail. Lila was also given a restraining order, which required her to keep away from me and my family. This order meant that I wouldn't have to worry about Lila sending me any more hate mail messages, and the court's ruling reaffirmed that I, as the mother, had the last say in how my child was raised. Both of them were also obliged to make amends for the emotional pain they had caused me and the child. By the end of the court proceedings, I could see Alan and Lila were furiously angry, but there was nothing more they could do. They received what they were due. The court hearing was 6 months ago, and my son's life has gradually started to feel more normal again. Believe is already 6 months old, and every milestone he reaches, from his first smile to the first time he rolled over to the fact that he's almost sitting up on his own, makes it worthwhile. I've been concentrating on ensuring he grows up in a secure, loving environment with family and friends who genuinely care about him. My mom comes to visit us as much as she can, and I'm incredibly grateful for her support. She's been a huge help with everything from watching my son at night to providing emotional support when needed. As for Alan and Lila, they've both been absent. Alan tried to get in touch with me once or twice, but I didn't reply, so I'm done with him. I've made it clear that my son and I are moving forward without him, and that's exactly what we're doing. As for Lila, the restraining orders have been effective, and I haven't had any direct contact with her since the court hearing, but to be honest, there are still times when I think back on everything that transpired with Alan and I make an effort not to allow Lila's hurt and rage to get the better of me. What counts now is the life we're creating for my son jointly.